Now let's run through a couple of other stories which are making rounds on the African continent this week. He's had his day in court, a German one to be specific, and he's bagged himself 14 years in prison. I'm talking about a former Rwandan mayor, Onesphore Rwa-Bu-Kom-Be, who got sentenced by a German court for his role in Rwanda's 1994 genocide. Now, even though the 56-year-old did not necessarily kill anyone, Rwa-Bu-Kom-Be did oversee and assist in the murder of at least 450 men, women and children at the Kuzuguro church compound in East Rwanda. He'd been living as a political refugee in Germany since 2002, and this is the very first trial connected with the Rwandan genocide to take place in Germany. Talk about a walkout. Lawyers for deposed Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi have walked out of his trial on charges of espionage and conspiring to commit acts of terror. The trial has now been adjourned until the 23rd of February. The former Islamist leader is facing 4 separate trials, 3 of which have now opened. Mr. Morsi was put in the soundproof cage in recent appearances to prevent him from shouting and disrupting proceedings. The defendants have said they cannot follow proceedings because of the cage, but the judge insisted that the headphones installed inside the dock will allow them to listen. Speaking of Egypt, the Egyptian Prime Minister Hazem Beblawi has confirmed that Islamist militants in the Sinai Peninsula are becoming a threat to foreign tourists, and they are not leaving anything to chance concerning an apparent ultimatum given by Islamist militant group Ansar Beit Al-Maqdis for tourists to leave the country. The threat was supposedly made on a private Twitter account affiliated with the group. The Egyptian government has struggled against rising militancy in the Sinai. The Twitter message gave all tourists until Thursday, February the 20th, to leave Egypt or face attacks. Ansar Beit Al-Maqdis has denied using social media, but the account has spoken for the group in the past. These threats come after a bus bomb attack on Sunday, February the 16th, which left 3 South Koreans and 1 Egyptian driver dead.
The blast, which occurred on Sunday, February 16, killed 3 South Korean visitors and their Egyptian driver. The attack is seen as the first on tourists since an army takeover in July spurred an Islamist insurgency. The Islamist militant group Ansar Beit Al-Maqdis said on Tuesday, February 18, that the bombing of a tourist bus in Egypt's Sinai was a suicide attack carried out by one of its fighters and threatened more strikes against economic targets. Family members of the survivors welcomed their return. South Korea's foreign ministry said 32 South Koreans were on the bus and that the tourists were Christians from the same church in South Korea. Egypt's tourism minister Hisham Zazu visited the border crossing with Israel with the governor of South Sinai and told visiting tourists that the government was taking additional measures to ensure their safety.
We're doing as a government our maximum, and we are all here. This is the governor of South Sinai and myself, and we are going to revise even anything that need to be revised from a security perspective.
If militants were behind Sunday's bombing, it would mark a shift in strategy to attacking softer tourist and economic targets. Egypt's vital tourism industry has already been hit hard by 3 years of political turmoil and street protests.
Now let's talk with Elizabeth Arrott from The Voice of America, who is standing by in Cairo for a clearer understanding of the situation.
It does seem to be a shift in tactics from the group that has been claiming responsibility for the bombings that have plagued Egypt ever since the overthrow of Mohammed Morsi last year. They have been, Ansar Beit Al-Maqdis has been basically targeting police, security forces, people like that. the attack on Sunday against the tourist bus really makes it a whole different ballgame now. And this threat that they are going to attack more tourists, anyone who stays here after today, has really, driven a fair amount of fear into for personal safety, as well as the idea too that tourism is a huge industry earner for Egypt.
How will this impact on the Egyptian economy now that tourists are being threatened, seeing that Egypt does thrive on tourism?
Yes, it is a devastating blow to an already devastated tourism industry. It had been quite a vital sector in the economy, and it's been very hurt by the unrest of the last 3 years. This is obviously going to cut out the last remaining efforts that they've made to bring tourists here, which was just the week before the bombing in Taba. They had the tourism minister had gone abroad and tried to sell Egypt as a great place to go as long as you avoided Cairo. If you went to the resorts on the Red Sea, that would be fine. Now, obviously, this news will change all of that, and this comes on top of an already greatly weakened economy already in Egypt.
So what would you say Egypt's political future looks like in light of this new development?
Well, it does seem to be a bit of a game changer if they're going from just military targets to now foreigners. And of course, the worry is that it'll also move into other civilian targets. And that would really, be a marked escalation. So far, it's just been this one bombing of the tourist buses, but it's showing a willingness to do something that would really could really hurt the country very badly and bring about even more sort of aggressive tactics by the government, further polarizing, the people who are against it to begin with. So it's not a positive development by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, after the break, there's more on Egypt. Despite the escalating tension, laughter still has its place.
Many factors define your health. Some you can control, while others are simply beyond you. On Health News, we highlight all these factors and through medical experts provide information that will help you take informed decisions on healthy living, nutrition, and keeping fit. Get incisive health policy analysis. Health News, promoting good health.
Welcome back to the program. Now, just before we call today, it's true that a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Some of the Egyptians have chosen to live by the former despite the tension, threats and unrest. An Egyptian comedy club is giving new talent a platform to perform and introduce them to the international world of stand-up. It was founded by Hashem El-Garhi and it's called Al-Hezb Comedy, meaning the comedy party. As at now, it remains the only existing comedy platform in Egypt which offers aspiring comedians room to perform.
Back in 2011, El-Garhi, a 26-year-old marketing manager for a luxury PR firm in Egypt and stand-up comedian, wanted to take the art form further than what was prevalent at the time, which was one show every 6 months to a year. But in Al-Hezb, they believe the frequency of shows, word of mouth, and even social media could play a major role in further developing the comedy scene.
Hezb comedy, to me personally, it's a platform for self-expression through comedy. This country doesn't really have that platform for people to go out there and perform stand-up comedy because it's a relatively new art in Egypt. The closest thing, even if you try to translate the art to Arabic, they say it's monologue, which goes back to the days of Ismail Yassin and all these big, comedians back then. But the art of stand-up comedy, standing in front of an audience with a microphone and, doing that and entertaining, that's relatively new. That's 5 to 7 years old here. So what I'm trying to do is to get that art out there more and tell people and inform them that, if you are funny, you can come to Hezb comedy and you can be a comedian. And in the future, like it is a career in the States and in Europe, it will be a career here.
As more shows are performed, Al-Hezb is gaining popularity not just in the rising audience numbers, but also with comedians themselves who have reached out for the chance to be part of the circuit. But despite the growing popularity, there is still hesitancy among some comedians. This is because many of the comedians still need encouragement to take part in shows, as the stand-up comedy scene is still relatively new. Many of the current crop of comedians made their debut at Al-Hezb, and this is one reason managing director and comedian Saif Abu-Kandil was attracted to the project, for the chance to shape the comedy scene in Egypt. Abu-Kandil believes the comedy scene is growing slowly, and at Al-Hezb they are aiming to jumpstart it.
The 3-year plan would be to, open comedy for all levels of Egyptian society. That's my goal. A lot of other comedians have that goal. I know many comedians back in the day when I first started doing comedy in Egypt in 2008. Comedians were like, one comedian was like going, I wish that I could do a gig for the everyday Egyptian. Not for these nouveau riche, middle class, upper class, elitist. They don't know, funny from good or whatever. They think that funny is like a TV program with studio laughter, and for them that's comedy. Or big names like, Russell Peters, that's comedy. But anything in between, it's like a thin line of gray and they don't know how to clarify it. But I think that definitely, stand-up comedy in Egypt is going to increase.
Both Kandil and El-Garhi believe one of the major attributes for the slow development of comedy in Egypt is that almost all comedians have a full-time job, whether they're doctors, engineers, advertising executives, or law students. In 5 years' time, El-Garhi is hopeful that he would own his own comedy club, where he can invite talents from abroad and attract not just a local audience, but an international one as well.
It's become the new catchphrase of the 21st century.
And that's where we draw the curtains on this episode of Network Africa. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And as always, I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to send an SMS to the number on your screen. Until next time, stay proudly African. I'm Cynthia Are. Bye for now.
A time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chart a course for an exalted future. Africa is at this threshold, as major actors in the Africa arena plots a renaissance towards common destiny. Let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, through the backstreets of Africa, to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and the strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, the rallying point for the emergence of a new Africa.